Welcome to episode 209 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing writer-producer Bob Farkas. He just did a comedy film called Crazy Famous. He's got an inspiring story about how he got his first film off the ground. He doesn't live in Hollywood and he didn't know anybody in Hollywood, and he had a whole other career in a whole other field. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 209. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I'll teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. I just want to quickly mention the writers group that I am in. We're always looking to add good writers to the rotation. We meet every Tuesday at 7:15 p.m. until about 10 p.m. in Sherman Oaks, California. It's right around where the 405 and the 101 freeways intersect. Here's how it works. Each week, 3-member writers put up around 25 pages of screenplay that they're currently working on. The pages are read on stage by professional actors in front of the other writers in the group, and then the listening writers give notes to the presenting writers. As a member writer, you'll be putting up roughly 25 pages every 5 weeks. It's a great way to workshop your material, network with other talented actors and writers, and hone your critical thinking skills by giving these other writers notes. This is a live in-person event, so you need to live somewhere near Sherman Oaks, California to be able to attend weekly. If you're not in the Los Angeles area, perhaps consider starting a writers group of your own. Nearly every city in the world has a community of filmmakers and writers, and in most cases, they're just looking for someone to step up and be a leader and get things organized. The one big stumbling block to my group is that you have to be committed to showing up nearly every Tuesday, even when you're not presenting pages, so that you can give notes to the other writers who are presenting that night. If you'd like to learn more about the group, go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/writers group, and the word writers group is all lowercase and it's all one word. I will, of course, link to it in the show notes as well. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing writer-producer Bob Farkas. Here is the interview. Welcome, Bob, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on. Thanks so much.
So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
Well, basically, I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, which is not really the mecca for film. But at the same time, I have an older brother, and he went to, of all places, the USC Film School, where he was editing film in the same trailers as George Lucas. And it was a bit of a process for him to get in, but for some reason, growing up in this area, he wanted to be a movie director, and so this is literally in the 80s. He got into USC Film School, and when he graduated, he literally made his first film, a feature called Prime Risk, about kids ripping off automated teller machines back in the day. And he made the film, and he got it released on HBO and all the cable channels at the time, had a limited theatrical release, and he made his money back. But the problem is that as a movie director, one of the qualities you have to have is you have to be able to take constructive criticism. And criticism was something that he didn't really take to too well. So he came back to the Washington, D.C. area and basically checked out of Hollywood and decided to make a career making videos and training films and stuff with the government. But at the same time, as a younger brother, I watched this whole process. and I immediately became attracted to movie making, specifically on the screenwriting side of it. So, I'm in my early 20s. I'm going to school studying business finance at George Washington University, and I have to be a screenwriter. Unfortunately, with no resources, no money, and as a cousin who worked at Paramount Studios, she showed me the reading room they had for thousands of screenplays stacked on top of each other. Basically, she said, it's going to be very difficult for you to ever have a career as a screenwriter unless you make the film yourself. And that was the magic word she said, make it yourself. So I put that ambition on the shelf, and I literally started a marketing business in a completely different industry. And then fast forward 30 years later, I had the money and resources to make a film, and that's what I did.
Huh. Wow, that's a fascinating story. So you went to this other career in advertising. Did you always plan on getting back into the entertainment industry? Was that sort of on the back burner?
In a backwards sort of way. I was always pretty good at business. So I started a marketing business that caters to national associations in the Washington, D.C. area. Most associations, whether it's for social work or accounting or for, most industries, they have their headquarters in the Washington, D.C. area because they want to lobby on Capitol Hill and advance the cause of their association, and what's a better place to do it than Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. So I started a business, and it grew since I was in my early 20s. And but I always had that ambition to be a screenwriter. And so I figured that if I could build the business to a certain point, I would have the necessary resources to independently finance a feature film, not something that's a student film or a ultra low budget, but a regular film that you would see with a production value that you would see on any movie theater, commercial movie theater in America or beyond. So literally, that's one of the reasons why I made my first feature, Crazy Famous, at the ripe old age of my early 50s. I'm 53 right now, so a little bit of a late start, but better late than never.
Yeah, no kidding. So I'm actually from Annapolis, Maryland, too, so not too far away. Yeah, my dad worked in DC.
You're near the bridge.
Yeah. So let's dig into Crazy Famous. You wrote it, produced it, executive produced it. Maybe to start out, you can just give us a quick pitch or log line for the film.
Well, the log line, very simply, is about an average Joe with no special skill or talent with an obsession to be famous. And that obsession gets him thrown into a mental institution because he's willing to do anything or try anything to get his name in lights. And at the institution, when the psychiatrist basically says, hey, listen, Bob, the chances of you ever becoming famous with no skill and no talent is minimal. To non-existent. And of course, when your life's ambition is something and somebody tells you you can't do it, he has a full tantrum, and they put him in a anti-suicide smock, and then after some time they let him loose in the institution, the mental institution, where he meets other patients. And one of the patients who overhears his desire to be famous at all cost or at all risk basically says, listen, I know where Osama bin Laden is hiding. He's not really dead. He's still alive and well. And if you get me out of here, out of this institution, I'll make you famous. And that's basically what drives the whole film, is that he meets a psychotic mental patient who claims that he's the next secret agent James Bond type that works with the CIA or worked with them, and he was thrown in the institution because he knows where he's hiding, but he won't confess where he's hiding. So literally, Bob helps him escape because he's under the influence of numerous mental health drugs. And when they escape with a band of mental misfits, that's when the fun begins as far as him pursuing his goal of becoming a household name.
Huh. Wow, fascinating. So where did this idea and story come from? What's sort of the genesis of it? The
genesis, very simply, is the fact that, this is kind of unrelated but related. I've been a youth basketball coach, a volunteer basketball coach for travel teams, AAU teams for a number of years, and I've met so many helicopter parents who weren't famous themselves, but they would push their kids to be famous and live through their kids. I mean, if you think about it, Ashley, when you're born and your parents are looking in your crib, do they think about you becoming a administrative assistant or a computer programmer or some kind of mundane job, or do they think or dream of you becoming a great actor or a great athlete or a scientist who cures cancer, somebody who's on the Supreme Court or something of that nature? I think it's universal in all of us to have this deep-seated need for fame and pursue it. And I think a lot of people would love to be famous, but because only the extraordinary become famous unless you create some viral video that makes you stand out some way. But it was this fact that I ran into so many people that were pursuing fame for themselves or for their family or for their offspring. And I really started to explore, what is it about being famous that everybody needs? Why not love? Why not acceptance? Why not recognition? So I wrote a script basically where it started off talking about all the different people and how they became famous. And then I talked about all the people, especially nowadays with the internet and social media, where a lot of non-talented people want to create a viral video or become famous. And so the whole idea of the whole human need of becoming famous was something that really drove this script. And the idea for the story was to find some kind of mission, or take an average Joe and come up with some comical mission on how to achieve that fame, being an average nobody. And one of the best scenes that I have, my favorite scenes, is when he's on the outside. I don't want to give away too much of the film, but they do escape from the mental institution, and he goes back and visits his parents after many years. And you can see and understand how the parents planted this seed in his brain, in his soul, that he is of no value unless he is somehow famous for something. And he has a coming to Jesus moment with his parents when he realizes that his parents have adopted and brought on other kids with a chance to become famous because they deem him to be a failure at becoming famous.
Huh. And I wonder if we could dig into that a little bit. I think that's fascinating. Obviously, I live in LA now, so there's tons of actors out here. There's tons of people that move here, and what you're describing is, it's whatever you saw in the Washington D.C. area. I'm sure it's even greater here in the Los Angeles area.
I would assume so.
Why do you think? Why do you think you were attracted to screenwriting? Because I meet a lot of actors, and you can see that there's something in them that they want that approval and they want that sort of fame. And I think a lot of the screenwriters maybe get into it for slightly different reasons. And I've wondered this myself, why do I keep trying to be a screenwriter? Why do I keep writing scripts? Why do I keep doing all of this stuff? What ultimately drives you? And so what do you think drove you to decide on screenwriting versus acting or directing or producing or a number of other things?
I've always had an affinity for writing, and actually, while I was running the business, a marketing business, I took a part-time moonlighting job as a sports reporter for the local newspapers in the Washington, D.C. area. So literally after work was over, my mundane marketing job, I would go out there and I would cover sports in the local area and write columns and so forth. I actually have written about 10 or 15 columns that got into the Washington Post as a guest writer. And it's something I always wanted to do. And literally, there was a time when I wanted to sell the company and just become a full-time writer, in this case for newspapers and stuff. But obviously, the newspaper business has changed dramatically over 20 or 30 years. And one of the things that attracted me about screenwriting per se is that I love to have the creative power of creating my own universe in a story and having all these different characters and all the characters, whether it's a lead character or a side character, they all have their motivations, just like you and I do. And the attraction of creating something, a story, and putting it on screen, because people are very visual, and I would think a written piece is not as attractive or powerful as a written piece translated to the screen with music and actors and the whole kit and caboodle. So the long and short of it is, screenwriting has always been something that's been very attractive to me versus acting or producing or directing, because of the fact that, it's kind of funny. From what I understand is, when you make a movie, the director gets most of the credit. The actors are actually seen, and they get all the glamour and the fame that comes along with it. And the writer doesn't get proportionately as much credit and attention for a movie. Mm-hmm. And, movies don't happen without a good screenplay. You talk to any actor, any director, producer, the screenplay is the most important thing. It's the blueprint for any movie. And because of that importance, that is the reason why I was always attracted to the screenwriting portion of it. I don't necessarily want to be in front of the camera, because I don't think I'd be good at it or talented at it. And screenwriting is something where, you write a screenplay for 3-4 months or 3-4 years, and it's like you're creating your own family. And actually, one of the things I realized is, for the 5 screenplays I've written, when you're finished with the screenplay, you're kind of lonely after that, because you said goodbye to all the characters that you created, and it's almost like you created your own family. And then once the screenplay is over and you're finished writing it, you have to wave goodbye to that family and move on. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the germ. There's other reasons, just being attracted to writing, period. But creating a screenplay from the dust, coming up with an original idea. That's why I don't like to really watch too many other movies, because I don't want it to sully my brain one way or the other. I want to create something that's completely original from my own experiences or from whatever my brain can create. Mm-hmm. So that, in a nutshell, is kind of the reason why screenwriting is so attractive.
Yeah. So let's talk about the writing process, and we can be sort of specific with Crazy Famous. You mentioned you'd written 5 screenplays. Let's talk about those 30 years. So you're running the this ad agency. You're moonlighting as a journalist, writing some articles. Were you also writing scripts during this period? Where did those 5 scripts you've written? So you were always sort of writing screenplays. And were you doing something to market those scripts? Were you sending them to contests? Were you sending them out to agencies?
I realized that anything in the arts, especially in the film business, as you can testify yourself, it's very competitive. And, that's one of the reasons why I did not pursue, for better or for worse, the reason why I did not pursue a screenwriting career in my early 20s is because of the fact that, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to raise a family? Blah, 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 because it's maybe more of a hit or miss proposition. So, while I was running the business and chasing around on different newspaper articles, one of the things that was my personal interest is late at night, when everything's done and the kids are sleeping and the family's, tucked away in bed, I'm up in my office writing screenplays. I have ideas, and then you write an outline of that idea, and then you start filling it in with characters from either people you've met or known or seen over the years, or you create characters out of the dust. And although I've never taken a film school class or a screenwriting class, I have read a number of screenplays, and again, with a brother that dabbled in the industry for a few years back in the day, I would pick up any resource on screenwriting, and now the internet's a great way. If you want to format something on a screenplay, You just Google it and you'll find out how to do it.
Yeah.
So I didn't take the normal pathway that maybe most in the industry has taken as a bit of an outsider.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the germ of what I've been doing over the years, is writing screenplays at night. When I have good ideas, I write for days in a row, and sometimes I leave it alone for months.
So was there some sort of development process that you would utilize? Or you finish a script, did you send it to your brother? He had some experience in the industry. Was there any kind of development? Do you get feedback? How do you handle that?
Well, while I was building a business, I didn't have the resources to make a film. I would just tuck it away in my drawer and be done with it. And then if I had further ideas to embellish it, if you think about a script over the years, you're going to constantly revise it and update it and do that type of thing. But in my late 40s, when I was determined to make a film and had the resources and financing available to make it, that's when I took it out of its drawer, and I had a number of people read it. I developed some contacts in the film industry, and again through my brother, who was going to class with Charlie Matthau, Walter Matthau's son, and a few others that are actively in the business right now. I got through some casting directors and a couple producers, and they read it. They gave me their input, and I started making revisions based on that. I sent it out for some coverage. I had everybody and anybody read it. I got to a casting director that put it out there to a few actors that we wanted. So it was basically a gamma globule that I had sent out to a lot of different people. And I wanted their comments and input on it, and that's how I refined the script to the point that when I found a producer to help me actually make it, which was a effort in its own that took 3-4 years just to find the right production team that wouldn't just talk about it, but that would actually help me make it. That's when, as I got closer to the shoot date, I was making revisions all the way up until the day of the shoot, and sometimes I would make it during the shoot because actors have their own slant and take on it. And so one of the things I learned about screenwriting that I didn't really appreciate before is that you're constantly changing that thing. It's a living, breathing animal, so to speak. And you can't just finish a script and say, I'm done with it. Now, maybe I'm a little different because I also produced it. So I was on the set, and usually writers aren't on the set while you're actually shooting the film. So I was talking to the actors, and they were explaining, Bob, I think it's too wordy here. Maybe we should try something else here. So that might have been a little bit of a different experience for me versus some of the other screenwriters that are out there.
Huh, wow. So let's talk about your process of getting on the crew. Just going through this. So there's got to be a point where you've got the script, you've started to get some feedback, you're rewriting it, you say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and make this movie. How did you go about getting together your crew, doing all that stuff? Was it just through these contacts? Was it Craigslist ads? Were you contacting people through websites? Maybe walk through that process. If there's anybody out there who's sort of in your situation, maybe you can give them some tips about producing.
It was basically contacts. I think going through directories and things like that gets you off to a start, but you have to know people, and you have to know people that are active in the industry. There's a lot of people that say they're active and they're doing things, but they don't actually follow through with it. So, it's interesting. When I first went out to L.A. from D.C. and I met with Mr. Matthau, that got me started, but I basically went through 3 or 4 different producers at the time, a couple casting directors. I went through 2 different directors. I spent some development monies that I wouldn't say it was a waste of money, but nothing happened. And then I was introduced through a entertainment lawyer that I know to a New York producer, different than the people in L.A. I was chasing after to get it made. You wouldn't believe how hard it is to make a film. even if you have a completed script and you have the financing lined up, it's still very difficult, especially when you're a first-time filmmaker and nobody really believes that you're going to make a film. So I met a producer, a very good producer, and his name is Vince Maggio from New York City. And he was a very blunt, direct, honest guy. And he's the one who basically helped me find the director, Paul Jarrett. And we got a casting director, which is very important. And basically, that's what started the process. And he did have a screenwriter doctor, a screenplay doctor, to help me flesh out the script a little bit more. And that's basically, in a nutshell, how we got it started.
Okay, perfect.
It wasn't easy, though.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So you have these 5 scripts. Why did you choose Crazy Famous as the one to pursue over any of these other stories that you had sitting around?
An embolism. I always wanted to make films that were appealing to a niche market. I have another script that I'm going to be starting to produce pretty soon called The Animal Lover, which is specifically about animals and animal rights and that type of thing, because I think it has a built-in audience. And with so many films out there now, you have to appeal at least to a niche audience that will see the film. And hopefully if it crosses over, more people will see it and it takes off that way. Now, against my wisdom, I felt that if I only had one chance to make a film, if it bombs or, for whatever circumstance or condition is out there that I don't know about, if I only had one chance, I wanted to make a film where as many people as possible could relate to the lead character or relate to the story. And that's when I said, if you ask 99 people, if you asked 100 people out on the street, 99 people would say, if you could wave a magic wand and make them instantly famous, 99 people would say, yes, do that, please. Wave your magic wand and make me famous. And the one person who said, no, don't do that, is probably lying. And so, from the fact that I wanted to create one movie where everybody could relate to the lead character, and in Bob, an average Joe who wants to be famous, I think everybody could take the ride with our lead character and really enjoy themselves, and they can enjoy the character safely, because the character is doing what most people want to do. They want to do anything and everything to get famous, and Bob will do it regardless of what trouble he gets into or what legal matters he gets into, or whether he gets thrown into a mental institution, or even if he gets killed. So, the thing about movies that is so attractive is that people can take 2 hours off and fantasize about being in the character's shoes and take a ride with them. And I felt because the power of fame is so universal, that is something I wanted to explore in a film. And if I only had one film to make, that's what I wanted to do it about. But so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. So what are the goals? This is kind of, as we wrap up, what were the goals for this film? And I understand you're kind of in the middle of the journey, but do you feel like those goals were a success?
Yeah, the film is done. It's in the can. It's completed, and it's going to be released on January 9th, 2018, on demand through as many platforms as Gravitas has. That's our distributor. We don't have a foreign distributor yet, but we're working on that right now. And the goals from here are to see, if audiences will take to it, like it, and watch it. It's never really been about making money, although making money helps. If the film has some traction, some legs to it, that'll give me the platform to make other films. Because what I'm really looking at is to have a second career where I'm making independent feature maybe once every couple of years, and as I said before, into the various niche audiences that I feel would be very interested in these various scripts that I wrote. So 75% of the goal is done. The film was shot and made, and I learned a lot. And now the most intoxicating part is coming up, which is, okay, it's now going to go out there into people's homes on TV, on cable, pay-per-view, subscription, VOD, blah, blah, blah. And how will they react to it? And will they understand the message that we have, and will they be entertained? And that's probably the most exciting part of the process, to see how audiences react.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe you can just mention now the Twitter, the Crazy Famous Twitter handle, Facebook page. Just tell us about how people can learn more about the film.
Well, we're on the three major social media pages. Where we have a Facebook page for Crazy Famous Movie. You could type that into the search engine. We also have Crazy Famous Film on Twitter, and on Instagram, I also think it's Crazy Famous Movie. But I'm sure that your listeners can find it on any of those three sites. And I am more than happy to have them join and follow as we get closer to our release date. And it would be overwhelming to me to have people, especially in the screenwriting industry, view the film and give their feedback. It's really an enjoyable process outside of all the problems we had. But if it was easy, I guess anybody could do it. Bob, I love the process.
Yeah, Bob, I really appreciate your coming on, talking with me. You're an inspiration. I love hearing stories like this where people, you don't wait for permission, you just go out and you make things happen for yourself. So right. I think that's just such an inspiration. Hopefully the people listening to this will be inspired as well. So I really appreciate your time today, and good luck with the film.
Thanks for having me on. I really do appreciate it, Ashley. Thank you.
A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the reader who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, characters, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We can provide an analysis on features or television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your project ideas, this is a great way to do it. We will also write a logline and synopsis for you. You can add this logline synopsis service to an analysis, or you can simply purchase this as a standalone product. As a bonus, if your script gets a recommend from a reader, you get a free email and fax blast to my list of industry contacts. This is the exact same blast service I use myself to promote my own scripts, and it's the same service I sell on the website. It's a great way to get your script into the hands of producers who are looking for material. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing filmmaker Alex Ferrari. He is a filmmaker and podcaster who runs the Indie Film Hustle podcast, and he recently completed a feature film called This Is Meg. This Is Meg is currently available on iTunes and Amazon, and also actually Hulu as well. All the typical on-demand services. So if you'd like to watch the film before next week's interview with Alex, I highly recommend that you do so, as it will give you a little bit more context. This is another great story about someone getting out there and creating something and not waiting for someone to give them permission to do it. He just got out there and made a film. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.